Hey friends, my name is Chris with TF Media. Today I want to show you guys how I got the final touches on this big project that I was working on. So for context, the project that I was working on, it was 18 interviews shot over 2 days. I was a one-man band. I ran the cameras, I ran the lighting, ran the sound, and even more daunting was the actual editing process. I had to get it all done within 8 days. So I crushed it, got it delivered. The client was happy. There was tears in the room when they were watching the video. So absolutely happy, right? I'll do a separate video about the gear and the lighting that I used, the editing in terms of the correcting, the grade. But in this video, I just want to show you guys like the finisher plugin that I used just to just add that extra spice that I was looking for that I wasn't able to get with what Final Cut provides me, right? So just to show you guys here, this is all corrected, it's pretty much good to go. And let me just turn on this adjustment layer. And that was the final look, all right? So again, turn off and turn back on. So there's a lot going on in here. It's really subtle because I chose to be a little bit more subtle with it. But let's talk about what I'm using here, okay? So over here, the plugin that I'm using and that I think you guys should definitely check out, it's called Dehancer Pro. So this plugin is amazing because it gives you guys so many features that other film emulation plugins just don't have. There's another one that I've been using for a really long time, maybe about 2 years, and this one just gives me so much more functionality, okay? You can go into here and you can set which camera profile you have. So they didn't have the one that I'm using. I'm sure they're working on adding more profiles. I'm using the S1H and the BS1H. They didn't have those in the Panasonic category, but you could come in here and just check out which cameras they do have, and if it's supported, it converts it for you. If not, you could just do it how I'm doing it. I'm doing it as an adjustment layer to finalize on top of the footage, okay? So you can see here, you can do right from the get-go, adjust your exposure, adjust the temperature, the tint. So I'm gonna go ahead and reset those. So you've got a lot of functionality from the get-go. You could do the defringe options. In this shot, I didn't need to do anything. And then right here is a ton of film. Look at that, guys. A ton of film emulations, all right? So I'm not gonna sit here and show you guys every single one of them, but golly, do they have film emulations for anybody and everybody. So if they don't got it here, and if it's not enough for you, then I don't know what to tell you, but they got a ton, all right? So for this shot, I didn't use any of the film emulations, but I wanted you guys to see that they have just about probably everything that you can think of, all right? And they also got the film compression here, right there, give it that different look. And what I like about these sections is that most of these sections have this impact slider. So it's kind of like I guess like an opacity kind of setting where this setting is adjusting how much the shot. So for example, here's at 0, here's at 100. Let's say that for whatever reason you like this look, I don't. But anyways, you like it, you just dial it back or dial it in as much as you need to, all right? So again, for this shot, I didn't do any of that. You could set your black points and do all that. I already had my contrast and all that, so I didn't really do that there, but you definitely can. And it gives you different settings here to be able to adjust. So you've got your luma, or you've got like the whole image, and you could just adjust how much black or how washed out the image is gonna be, just to give it a little bit more contrast and dial it in. I've seen a ton of tutorials in Final Cut how to actually do this setting, and it's kind of funny how Final Cut lets you do it, but the fact that you get to do it here super easy with just 2 sliders is super awesome, right? You can add these things. If that's super what you're into, the whole film look, then they've got it here, and we can expand on that. But here are the main ones that I used. So to begin with, I didn't use any of these just because I didn't feel like for this kind of like corporate interview style, I didn't really need to do such a look. If I was shooting maybe a wedding, a music video, or something a little bit more, I don't know, free in the creativity, maybe I would have gone in a little bit deeper. But for the corporate space, which is what my company focuses on, this is how I use the plugin, right? So what I like about this section called the color head, I really like it because it gives me that same kind of like but it gives me more functionality than I hope you've edited photos in Lightroom, but you scroll all the way to the bottom, you go to the calibration, and you can adjust the colors, right? So here you get that same functionality, which I think is like wicked cool. So I could adjust my yellows, and if I want to go more into the yellow, if I want to go more into the blue, I can adjust that there. I'm going to go back to where I was. I can adjust my greens. If the shot's too magenta, let's push it a little bit towards the green. If it's too green, go backwards. So it gives me that same functionality to dial in the look that I'm going for. I could fix my shadows, my highlights, and all that. And again, here we got our cool friend, the impact slider. Nothing's happening to the image. It's too much. Let's dial it back into where we liked it. All right, so I love this section right here. Is probably one of my favorites because it lets me fix, dial in those little minor tweaks that might happen sometimes when you're just super running and gunning or you don't have a color checker. It lets you fix it later. All right, and then you got the power of the impact slider to, you know, super dial it in or just make it a little bit more subtle. Right, so over here we've got our grain, and I'm gonna punch in so that we can really see what's going on with the grain. Okay, so you guys can see there's grain there in the shadows. There's some grain going on in the midtones with her skin, and there's a little bit of grain. It's a little subtle in the highlights. We've got a pretty wide shot. We've got our shadows and our midtones here, and with the film grain, it just gives you so much functionality here of how you want to use it. All right, so you could see I was pretty subtle with it, but it gives you a ton of functionality. All right, so just I guess from the top here we can fix the size, how big we want this grain to be. So right there, super noticeable. I tend to keep it between 1 and 3, so I'm gonna dial it back, but I'll just leave it here. I'll leave it here just so that we can see what's going on. Okay, and then we've got our amount. So how much grain do you want in that image? Do you want it just saturated, or do you want barely noticeable grain? So I chose to be a little bit more on the, you know, the subtle look. And then this is the cool part that I haven't seen before. We've got our resolution. So do we want the grain to just mega soften the image and just kind of, you know, really soften the image, or do we want to preserve the resolution that we were shooting? So I believe I was shooting this in like 5 point something K. Unnecessary, I know, but since I was a one-man band, I wanted the functionality. If I had to readjust my shot later in post, I did want to have it in 5K so that I could readjust it into a 4K timeline. Okay, so what I like here is that it helps you either preserve the detail of the shot. So we could even see here, that's probably a little tight, we could zoom out there. So we could see how much details in the shots, or we can kind of soften the image a lot. Okay, so this slider right here, for you guys that are after the cinematic look, we want it to be soft. We hate sharp images. I was shooting on super sharp Sigma glass, so yeah, this slider came in uber handy. All right, so full resolution, some may say that's too sharp, but we can soften it up with the film resolution slider. Okay, soften that sucker up as much as you want to, as much as you need to. Love it. All right, yeah, let's go back to our wide shot here, and let me punch back in, and then we can kind of dial in super detailed how or where we want the grain. Do we want how much in the shadows, barely noticeable? Do we want in the midtones, like to affect her skin a lot, or we want to dial it back to make it a little bit smoother in the highlights, to just saturate that a little bit or make it a little smoother? And again, like I said, I chose to go super subtle with this, and then we can affect if we want color noise or not. So personally, I don't like the color noise look, so I always dial that all the way back down. But if that's what you're going for, if the shot requires it, you've got the option there. Okay, so we've got our film type right here. So to me, the way how I noticed it, and again, as I keep experimenting, I will, you know, correct myself if I notice something's wrong. But to me, this is more like I don't know if maybe you've ever played with like overlays where you've got overlay setting or screen setting. To me, the negative is like legit all in the effect, and the positive, it's a little bit more subtle on top of the footage. So for this shot, I wanted it to be a lot more subtle, so I went with the positive, right? And then we've got our analog or digital, and I went with analog. And again, we've got our enable, so no grain. All right. And then we also have some halation going on. Again, super subtle, nothing over the top like shooting at 1.2 Pro Mist or anything like that. So let me turn that off, and you can kind of see it here mostly in her skin, what's going on. So when I turn that on, you see that glow come back right here on the edges. And the cool part is that you've got a mask to show you what's being affected. So we can actually see what's being affected. Obviously the lights, a little bit of detail, and then around her cheek is where we're getting some of that halation there. So let me turn that mask off. Coming back here, we've got our source limiter, so it just tells you how far out from the source it's gonna go. You see how much more glow, and I'm gonna turn off the grain so we could see it a little easier. So you're looking here at this glow, so you want to keep it closer to the edges of the source. Right there, it's barely noticeable. Or do we just want to go all out and blast everything? So corporate video, I went more subtle with the look. We've got our gain, so do we really want it to pop out or not really? And then here I went ahead and I blasted it. We've got our smoothness. So right there, it's not as smooth. I could kind of see it looks a little toothy. I hope you could see that. So I went ahead and just left it smoothness because I wanted it to just be subtle, not that noticeable. We've got to where we can add more diffusion. So we've got a lot of glow going on. Obviously that wasn't the look I was going for. We've got global diffusion to where it's all the image is being affected here. So you could see what that does. Went ahead and I believe I had that pretty much set to default settings. We can amplify the signal, so we want more glow or not. We could change the color of the glow, which is pretty cool. So I left it at default. And we can do some blue compensation because sometimes the halation tends to like warm up the image. So if you're into your blues and you want to preserve the blues, then you've got this setting here to help you with that. So there, in this shot, I didn't really need to do that, so I left it alone. And then again, we've got our friend, the impact. So no halation whatsoever, maxed out halation, and I left it there. All right. So here we got some bloom, and again, we've got some settings here to help us see what's going on. And with this shot, I didn't really do a lot of bloom. Right here, if I work with the limiter, you'll see a lot more bloom coming in. I didn't do a lot of bloom because I didn't want it to look, somebody called it a 90s soap opera. I didn't really want that for this shot. So I left it alone, and then I already had like natural bloom going on with the light. You can kind of see that glow there, so I didn't want to like make it just super obvious that I had bloom going on. So I left it a lot softer. It's there, it's super subtle, but you have to really be like pixel peeping to be able to see it, okay? So we've got bloom, we've got halation, we've got a vignette, which in my other plugin, I already had a vignette going on, so I didn't have to add it. But you can see there, we've got vignette settings, and you can play around with the settings to fix that. Film breath, I didn't touch that. We'll talk about that in a different video. The gate, I didn't touch that. We'll talk about that in a different video as well. And then what I like here, you've got your false colors. You can see how well exposed you are or not. So you can see right here, I'm clipping the blacks. That's okay. I wanted it to be in a dark room. That is completely okay. And we could see here her skin's a little hot, so we could dial back the exposure just a teens. Or we could see our clipping settings. So right there we can see that my blacks are clipping. To me, again, that's okay. So again, super cool aspect here. So we've been talking a lot about our impact friend, but right here we've got a final impact. So I think what would be super flexible would be to just dial it the way you really like it. You know, I decided to just kind of work per section with the impact slider, but you could really dial it, jack it up however you want it to look, and then you could just do like a final output and dial it to where you feel like it looks good, and then maybe you can go back with the impacts, and maybe it has too much bloom, too much halation or whatever, then you can go back and fix that as well. Okay, but we've got some very cool settings in this plugin. You can, once you get something that you really like, you can export it as a LUT, and you've got it pretty much saved there for future uses. So it's super easy. You don't have to go back here and fix it every single time. You just got a LUT that you've made up and you can use for whatever. So ton of settings, ton of functionality. I know I didn't really go like super in depth to what every little slider does, but I just wanted to show you guys how I used it and how I feel like I got that final look that I was going for. In my original shot, like my blues just weren't popping, and like I felt like there was something missing. Obviously I wanted grain, I wanted some bloom, some halation, I wanted that like reddish around the highlights, around the edges, to make it look a little bit more filmic. And I guess I'm throwing out buzzwords here, but with this plugin I was able to achieve all of that. I got my blues back to where I wanted them, I got some softness with my bloom, and then I've got that little red right there that so often characterized with filming with film. You know, I wasn't shooting on film, but that gets me a little bit closer just to get the look that I'm after. And obviously the grain just makes the image softer, and you guys saw that the super cool tool there with the film resolution. If you feel like you're shooting or your shot's way too sharp, shooting on super sharp Sigma lenses or whatever, then you could just soften it up later in post, which makes it super easy. Right? So in terms of, I guess, final things I want to talk about with the rendering, personally I'm running on a MacBook Pro M1, so the first generation of M1s, 16 gig, you know, not super spec'd out or anything. And the rendering time, I have noticed it is longer than normal. That's, I mean, it's expected, but it's not nothing to where it's like, you know, like back in the day when I used to edit on a different editor and I would have to leave it overnight. You know, it just takes a little bit longer, maybe a couple more minutes to render. And in terms of playthrough, personally, with all my settings and everything dialed in, I can't really play it smoothly without having to like render it. So you could see here how it plays.
Had no idea how they would feel about us. You guys welcomed us.
So again, that goes back to my computer not being super spec'd out. But if you got something like the new Mac Studios, or you're just lucky enough to get a super spec'd out computer, then I think you should be fine, because it is optimized for Final Cut. All right, so this plugin's available for Final Cut, DaVinci, and Premiere, and they've also got a version of it for Lightroom. So yeah, if this is your thing and you really like dialing in that film look, there is nothing out there, at least from what I've experimented with, that comes close to the amount of control and the amount of like legit, like just the amount of control that this thing gives you. It's insane compared to the other ones that I've used. And I've used some of the popular ones, I've used some like lesser popular known ones, and this one by far is the most intense in terms of what it lets you do and dial in that final look. All right, so if you like it, I will leave a link in the description for you guys to go check it out. I am a part of the affiliate program. If you think this is something you want to check out, you could do the trial. If later on it's something that you like, you could definitely buy it. It will help out the channel, but I'm just here to tell you, show you guys my experience with how I used it, and to show you potentially the amount of control and the things that you would be able to achieve if you like just super dive in deep with this plugin. All right, So hope this video wasn't too long. Hope the video was interesting. And yeah, if you have any questions, if you would like to see a rundown of how I got this shot, the interview setup, the cameras, the lighting, the color grading and all that, if you want to see all that for this project, again, insane big project, leave me a comment and I'll get to work on those videos for you guys. All right, but till next time, take care. Thanks for watching and y'all have a good one.